Well, welcome into Bayou Roar. On this episode, I'm going to be recapping LSU's win over the Florida Gators, as well as talking about some of the big things that happened in week 3 of college football. But of course, we're going to start with LSU's 20-10 win on Saturday night over Florida. And I know that this game, by all means, was not the most, just best performance we've ever had. I just put a lot of words together there, but I know it was not the cleanest game in the world offensively. I know this was a night where the defense really had to carry you. But look, in a series as crazy as the Florida series is, I think you should be glad that you left this one with a win. Because, you think through the history of this series, lots of twists and turns, lots of just craziness that has happened. And when you look at it from specific games from '07, where LSU wins on a night where they get, five fourth down conversions to go for them. Jacob Hester runs in a touchdown late, puts you up. I mean, that was a night that was absolutely intense and wild, but you ended up winning. Then you fast forward, obviously, to the shoe game, where, LSU goes in as a major underdog in a game that they really should not have had any business winning in a year where they were not good, in a year where Florida was doing really good, and LSU hangs on to win it in part because of a shoe that was thrown and a major penalty there, but also like fog rolled in. Cade York hits a 57-yard field goal. Wild, wild night that year. And just, I couldn't believe it. That was one of the craziest wins I think I've ever seen LSU just take, because again, they were not great that year. But then I even forgot about games like the 2010 game where Terrence Tolliver grabs a last second touchdown with like 5 seconds left on the clock to put you up for good and to win that game. And like I said, I've completely forgot about that one. But this game is just crazy and wild. Florida has won, obviously, like last year, they won a game where statistically LSU dominated every stat category. But Florida still managed to win because of the absolute chaos they caused defensively. You think about that. In a game where LSU should have won, Florida just took it. You think about 2018, where Joe Burrow threw his first pick of the season against Florida, and that's what ended up sealing the game for Florida in that one. Like, just an absolutely wild series. So the fact that you walked out of Saturday with a win over Florida, obviously really, really good for you. I know you don't want to think about it like that, but this is a crazy series. I'm always just happy when we beat Florida, and I'm glad, honestly, we played them early, and now we can say we're done with them. Like, that's a game that just always stresses me out. So I know it was a weird night. And look, honestly, I hate to say this, but even thinking back through a lot of these games, this is the most Les Miles performance LSU has had probably since Les left the program. Like, honestly. You think about all those Les Miles games where offensively you just had absolutely nothing, but your defense made play after play after play and carried you to a victory. That's exactly what this was on Saturday night. Absolutely what that was. And, you know, and that's the thing. And, I can't say much else other than that. It's just this was a night where the defense absolutely was the star. And now you have a lot of questions offensively. And I think I'm going to do our recap a little bit different this time around. Normally, I kind of go through notes that I have for the first and the second half, but I think the same storylines existed in both halves. So I'm just going to talk about a defensive recap, an offensive recap, and honestly, let's shout out the special teamers as well, and then some overall thoughts afterwards. But we'll start with special teams. I'll get that out of the way because it should be pretty quick. But holy smokes, Grant Chadwick had an amazing game for LSU on Saturday night. And I know when we're talking about a punter being an incredible player for the game, that is obviously just wild. But here's the thing. Grant Chadwick saved you a lot on Saturday night by being able to flip the field. Now, yes, there were times where Florida's return man caught you, not napping, but just he got you and he was able to get, some yardage back to help them out a little bit. But for the most part, Chadwick was absolutely thundering those kicks down the field. I mean, he has a powerful leg. And not only that, he's got some pretty good precision too, as with the big punt he had in the second half, where it was going out of bounds anyways, but Hilton kind of helped it out by grabbing it at like the 2 yard line. Like Chadwick all night long delivered punt after punt after punt and put your defense in a much better position after the offense just continued to stall out over and over and over again. So, this is something that, obviously is a really bright spot for me because since Jay Bramblett left, I mean, and it wasn't like that he just left. I mean, he was out of eligibility, but since Bramblett, was done at LSU last year, we did not have a good punting game. We just didn't. And I was kind of worried. I was like, man, Brian Kelly, brought Jay Bramblett from Notre Dame, and Bramblett was awesome. But now we can't seem to find a punter. Like, what's going on here? Like, he's usually got pretty good special teams guys on his football teams. Like, he showed that at Notre Dame. He brought, that here for the most part. Like, what's going on? And it seemed like no matter who we threw out at punter last year, they just couldn't get it. And so the fact that you went out and you got Chadwick from MTSU, which by the way is my alma mater, so shout out to the Blue Raiders. But Chadwick has been really, really good. And I'm really glad that he is a young punter as well, because now we're going to have him for a couple of years and we can at least rest easy knowing we've got a good punter again. Somebody that hopefully you won't have to use a whole lot throughout his career, but when he goes out there, he's going to make effective plays happen. So, big time shout out to Grant Chadwick because you really delivered in this one. Also, I mean, no, I know Damian, Ramos, didn't get too much work in this one, but he hit the field goals that he had the opportunities to hit. And that was obviously huge in a game like this against Florida, where it ended up being a very, very poor night for you offensively. I can't remember. I'm trying to look it up now, like just how far out those field goals were. But you think about like the first one he hit was pretty good. But then on the second one, I believe that was the one where you had the false start. So he hit a 47 and a 45 yarder in this one. By all means, his range is not that far out. And I know that's what a lot of fans have complained about with Ramos is that his range is just not the longest we've seen from an LSU kicker, obviously in the past, like a Cade York. But here's the thing for 47 and 45, those are both really good. And again, those both came in the second quarter when you were getting absolutely nothing offensively. And so shout out to the special teams guys. They made their plays. They did what they had to do and you ended up winning by and large because of what they were able to add in to the equation because without those field goals and without those big time punts, it could have been really, really bad for LSU. So I know it's not the most exciting thing to be hyping up, special teams guys, but we've got some good special teams guys, which is really, really good. You think about the early Brian Kelly days where we were lucky if we got a fair catch from a punt returner. We were lucky if we got, to flip the field, in the right way. Like we've had a lot of ups and downs throughout the Brian Kelly era when it comes to special teams. I guess that's what I should have said. It's not necessarily you look back at the early days and say Bramblett stunk or Ramos stunk, although he had a couple field goals blocked because of poor blocking. But we've had a lot of ups and downs in the Brian Kelly era with special teams at different times. And it seems like this unit this year is probably the most complete special teams unit that we've had in a while. So from the returners to field goal kicking to punting, it seems like it's all together now, which is really, really good. So again, I know it's not the most exciting thing to hype up, but it is one of the few things you have to highlight because of how well that they did. But now we'll move into defense because obviously defensively, you can't praise these guys enough for what they went out there and did on Saturday night. Because on a night where your offense was giving you absolutely nothing, you stepped up big. And let's not act like the loss that you suffered on the first drive defensively, where Whit Weeks was thrown out of the game for a targeting call, is like some little small thing to overcome. That was an absolute huge moment to happen on literally your first defensive drive of the game. And look, just to throw my 2 cents into the ring, no, that should not have been called targeting. Whitweek should not have been ejected. That was an absolute just baloney call. And I think that rule has got to be changed. I saw a lot more plays on Saturday that qualified as targeting than what Whitweeks did on Saturday night in Death Valley. Like a lot more on Saturday that was qualified as targeting. But here's the thing, and I heard somebody say this. I would have even been okay if they have some kind of system in play for targeting where it's like flagrant fouls in basketball, where you have one level where, like, yes, it's still a 15-yard penalty, but your guy doesn't get ejected because, yes, technically it was a helmet to helmet contact. So, yes, technically Witt did, by the letter of the rule, commit quote unquote targeting, but with the intention not really being there, and it was just more incidental, like dude lowered his head as Witt was going in for the tackle. Like, give us the 15-yarder and don't eject Witt. Now, if Witt had launched himself, tried to spear him with the crown of his helmet, then yes, throw him out. But there's just got to be different levels to this because we can't, say that that is an equal call across the board. It's just not. It's not like pass interference where it's pretty obvious most of the time if it's PI. There are sometimes where obviously, yes, it's questionable, but it's a little bit easier to say across the board that most, like 9 out of 10 times, they're making the right call when it comes to pass interference. Like it just is. But with targeting, there's so much gray area. We have got to clean this rule up. I love the spirit of the rule, trying to protect guys, make sure we don't see a whole lot of stretchers coming out anymore. Like I understand and I like the rule in terms of player safety, but it's got to be fixed because that was just absolute baloney. But the fact that this team responded, West Weeks had probably his best game as an LSU linebacker until he got hurt. I mean, was tremendous. But then let's talk about that too. West Weeks ends up going down, with a calf strain is what they're saying, and it looks like it's not going to be too bad. But obviously, they didn't want to push him anymore on Saturday night. But Devon Keys, who was another guy that I always said was a sleeper guy for this team because of how he played at times last year for you, comes into this game and does tremendously. He ends up leading the team in tackles by the end of the night. But not only that, he had a huge, I think they officially called it like a half of a sack. But on that first possession of the second half, he comes in with a huge play there. He also, I think I caught him making a big time tackle on a guy that, man, if he didn't catch up to him, he could have potentially slipped through and been gone, which obviously would have really stung in a game like this. So Devon Keys comes in and makes an absolute force of himself. And again, I just love when my sleeper guys are hitting, and that's not to toot my own horn here. It's just that's really awesome to see. I'm glad Devon Keys is making plays. And the fact that these young linebackers, Tyler Singleton came in for a couple plays, the third Weeks brother came into this game like randomly at the end to play, and he actually played pretty decently well. Like they didn't ask him to do a whole lot, but he did well. Like you got big production from your young guys, which was nice to see because definitely that could have been a very scary situation. And even the broadcast guys kept going, I wonder if they're going to pick on these young linebackers over and over and over again. And they stood up to the occasion. Like you have to give them their applause for that. Now, I will say this too. I mean, obviously, the linebackers played pretty well considering all of the circumstances they were up against. But this defensive front, for the first time all year, kind of struggled. Like, this was the first game all year I haven't really seen LSU's defensive line be super dominant. Like they weren't really getting a whole lot of push through for the most part. And honestly, it didn't kill you in this one. That was one of my keys to the game, was that I thought the defensive line had to win in the trenches for this one. And that ended up not really being that big of a difference maker at the end of the day. just because Florida offensively threw you something early on that I felt like was just completely different than what we were maybe thinking they would. They used a lot of quick game, a lot of screens, a lot of just getting the ball out of DJ Lagway's hands fast, so that way they weren't just sitting still. And that obviously that went against what LSU wanted to do, which was to bring pressure, to blitz, to do all these things. And it didn't kill LSU obviously in this game, but it did hurt a little bit. I mean, they were getting you here and there on little dump offs and stuff like that. But again, it's similar to what LSU did against Clemson when they knew, hey, we're not really going to be able to do much with a really good defensive line. Let's try to go quick so that way they don't really have time to just absolutely blow up the line. So at the end of the day, obviously that's not what you really had to have, because when the quarterback throws as many interceptions as he did, your defensive line didn't have to play like outstanding, but it was a little bit of a bummer that this was the first game in a while that they really struggled in. And I really hope that that will kind of amp them up and get them going for the next couple of games, especially against Ole Miss in a couple of weeks. Southeast Louisiana, yeah, they should be fine against them, obviously. But I'm hoping by the time they get to Ole Miss that they're fired up, ready to go back out there and prove themselves again, because that's going to be the next big game on the schedule. So, anyways, all that being said, the defensive line did struggle a little bit, but it was nice to see your linebackers stepping up, playing well. And man, while we're on it, let's just talk about Harold Perkins, because Harold Perkins all game long was an absolute animal. And this was another guy that I highlighted as being an important piece to LSU's season for this year. And if you haven't listened to that episode, it was one of the first ones we did. It's not up on YouTube, but it is on audio platforms, so Spotify, Apple, all those things. At some point, go back and listen to that one, because I listed obviously some sleeper guys to think about, like Devon Keys, PJ Woodland, and Xavier Thomas were on that list of sleeper guys. But also I named guys that I thought were really important to LSU's run this year, and the chief amongst them was Harold Perkins. And in this game, he showed you why he is probably LSU's ultimate X factor for this year. Because that dude was going out there, he was diving and tipping passes away. He was creating havoc on any play. I mean, he started to blitz on one play and he jumped up and knocked the ball down. Like, the dude is just an absolute animal. And the star position has absolutely unleashed his full potential this year. It really has. And shout out to Blake Baker, shout out to the whole defensive coaching staff for finally putting this guy into a position where he can go out and ball out. I saw so many tweets on Saturday that were like, it feels really good that Harold Perkins is truly bringing back number 7 now. And that is absolutely the truth. Harold Perkins is bringing honor and glory back to number 7 right now, and it is awesome to see. He had a phenomenal game against Florida. You can't take that away from him. He was an absolute animal. And so, despite some of the struggles that the front 7 had, you can still give them a little bit of grace because they played hard and they played really, really well. And so, and honestly too, a holding call on Jacobian Guillory because of the pressure he was starting to make on one play saved you from giving up a busted coverage touchdown. So even on max effort plays like that one, that's saving your team at times. So, I mean, really big shout out to the front 7. Even in a game where they struggled, they still made the plays they needed to make, which was really good. But obviously the stars of the night on the best side of the field for LSU was the secondary. And if there's one big note you can take from this defensive performance, is that DBU is officially back at LSU. I mean, holy smokes. I knew that this secondary was bringing back absolute glory to LSU this year, but this was the coming out party for them. Obviously, 5 interceptions will do that, but golly, Tamarcus Cooley grabs an interception, which was awesome. DJ Pickett gets his first career interception, which, like, he was another guy I highlighted as being important for LSU this year. If he can emerge as the true 5-star corner that he was slated to be coming out of high school, I thought he could really add a lot of value. He gets his first career interception in this one. You have AJ Halsey, who grabs an interception for you towards the end of the first half and puts you basically into field goal range, like to get you some points that you desperately needed. Huge. Huge play after huge play after huge play. But of course, the biggest of them being Deshaun Spears got not just one, which was awesome because, yeah, you had to have that one. But then his next one was a pick six. And that was the only points scored by either team in the second half was the 58-yard return by Deshaun Spears on that pick six. Like absolute insanity, but it was so awesome. It was so awesome to see DBU just back into full beast mode. And I kept getting hype so much. And look, is part of this because DJ Lagway maybe isn't as good of a quarterback as we all thought he was? Absolutely, DJ Lagway played pretty horribly, for most of this game. But there was also some flashes with Lagway where you saw him make a couple throws that you said, "Holy smokes, like that was a pretty good throw." The tying touchdown at the end of the first half was one of those moments for me too, where he put that ball in a spot in the red zone that I was like, man, you can't really blame anybody for that one. Like that was a good throw. Like, and that was a good catch by the receiver too. But there was just times where I felt like, man, if this DJ Lagway that's making some of these throws could show up, he'd be giving a lot more teams problems. But he kept throwing it up and just for grabs. And even when he tried to throw it away, that's when Pickett caught his interception. Like, just a rough night for Lagway, yes. But let's not lie. This LSU secondary was just played fantastic. You even look at one of those Deshaun Spears picks. I think it might have been the pick six, but it could have been his first one. I mean, they fooled DJ Lagway. DJ Lagway thought from the way that they were set up, he had a chance to hit a guy going towards the middle. Spears just read his eyes and absolutely cut off the throw and got the pick. Like it's not just like that Lagway just threw up passes for grabs and they just went out there and got every single one. Like there were times where LSU just diagnosed the play. And we haven't seen things like that in a long time for LSU defensively. I am so pumped right now about what this means moving forward. Because here's the thing, I think for a lot of people, they're going to look at this year's defense and say, well, I mean, it's nice, but you've got Mansour Delane, who's probably going to leave after this year because he'll go pro. You've got AJ Halsey, who is, I think, out of eligibility after this year, so he'll go pro. Tamarcus Cooley will have a decision to make, but he could be gone. Like, so a lot of people are probably going to sit at the end of the year going, well, this was a great LSU defense, but what are they going to do now that all these transfers are gone? Well, shoot, now we got Deshaun Spears who can rotate in and play because he's only a sophomore. Like, he can go out there and play and do big things. Like, DJ Pickett's a true freshman. Now he's going to be a guy that you can rely upon. PJ Woodland is a young guy. I think he's a sophomore. I think he's a true sophomore. But you've got guys now that you can rely upon that are doing really, really big things. And so that just makes me really excited about the future of this team, too. Just how well this secondary is playing. Because it's not just giving you a leg up in games like this year, it's also setting you up really, really well for the future. And it should make Tiger fans really excited about what they're going to have even beyond this year. But obviously, in the context of this season, it's fantastic because, again, last year's defense is not winning you this game. As improved as they were last year, they're not winning you this one. But this year's defense, incredible, and did exactly what they have to do. But then we move over to the other side of the ball. Offensively, we're just, man alive, you had a rough week once again. And look, it didn't start off well, obviously. You had a 3 and out to open up the game. And after what happened last week, where all game long you seem to be stuck in the mud, not a good look for you if you're Joe Sloan and company. Like, just not a good look. And look, I don't know. I don't know what is, necessarily being talked about in meeting rooms on campus. Brian Kelly at his Monday press conference tried to clarify a little bit like, hey, Joe Sloan is calling what we're asking him to call. Like, we're asking him to be more of a manager at times for this offense because we don't want to make a mistake. We don't want to turn the ball over. We don't want to shoot the team in the foot. But this is just kind of a disappointment overall because the whole thing about this year's team was yes, we want to see the defense take a step forward, but we were excited about this offense because you brought back a really great quarterback in Garrett Nussmeier. You brought in great weapons like Barry Brown and Nick Anderson and Bauer Sharp to add to a room of offensive weapons you already had, like Aaron Anderson and Chris Hilton and Trades Green. And yet we're getting nothing. And it's one thing to say, too, okay, they struggled against a really great Florida defense where you're going up against guys who will be in the NFL, at one point. But like also at the same time, this even looked worse than like Clemson. And Clemson wasn't like this offensive explosion by any means, but they just looked more in control at Clemson offensively than they did against Florida. They just looked like they could never get a rhythm, could get a sequence together. I mean, just it felt like play calling was just bad. I mean, yes, even if you're trying to protect the ball where you're not shooting the team in the foot, you can at least try to do more than what they were going out there and doing. And so it was a very, very disappointing. It was a very disappointing night. And Garrett ended up with 220 yards and a touchdown, which was nice. That was probably one of the biggest plays of the game, that touchdown throw to Xavier Thomas. And Xavier had a nice night, 4 for 35 and the touchdown. Like, that was good. Aaron Anderson continues to be wide receiver one, continues to go out there and be your guy each week. He had 4 catches for 75 yards, which was nice. But like Nick Anderson caught 1 pass. Marion Brown caught 2 passes. Barrel Sharp had 3, and one of them was a 65-yarder. But it's very sad. You've got all these weapons, and they're barely getting any catches. They're barely making opportunities to flip the script on the game. And if you heard my, preview for the Florida game, that was one thing I thought LSU could flex was their depth at wide receiver versus a secondary that, yes, has some talent, but is very thin and not as deep. And I thought LSU could take advantage of some of that. But no, they really never did. And it just, you know, and I don't know what to do. That's the thing. Offensively, at this point, you can't really say much more other than that. Now, they did have a really nice run at the end of the game. Obviously, a 51-yard run for Caden Durham, where he ended up, because of that 51-yarder, getting 93 yards for the day. But it's just sad because you just can't get a run game going outside of that one. You're not necessarily throwing the ball well. I mean, that 65-yard pass to Bauer Sharp, hey, that was awesome because they sold that thing beautifully. That play action run and flipped it down the field to him. That was a beautiful play. But even on that, what happens next? Jawan Johnson fumbles the football, and and you kill all of that momentum. You just absolutely squandered it. And then on top of that, Nussmeier threw the stupidest pick he's thrown all year, where I don't even know what he was thinking. There's an obvious penalty on Weston Davis, and you just throw it right to the team in a panic play. I mean, it's just been a night where it's so confusing as to what do you do? Like, how do you fix this? Is this an offensive line issue? Is this just poor play calling? Is this just, you have a bunch of guys that aren't confident right now offensively that, are trying to gel together and get things going. Like, I don't know what the problem, I don't know if there's one thing you can point all the problems to. But what I know is in 2 games back to back, your offense has looked terrible. Just absolutely terrible. And again, Brian Kelly tried to, like, I don't want to say cover it up, but like he tried to explain it by saying, hey, we don't want to turn the ball over. We don't want to put our team in danger. And I can understand that. But to a certain extent, you also have to understand if you're Brian Kelly, like, now he, in his heated press conference, he said something kind of stupid, but you got to understand if you're Brian Kelly, we have expectations for this offense. And in that heated press conference, he said, would you rather us beat Florida 70-0? And it's like, well, that's a dumb question. Like, yes, obviously we would have liked that. Like, that would have been awesome. Like, that's a really dumb question on Brian Kelly's part. But like, At the same time, that's the whole thing, right? That's why we're frustrated is we know that Nussmeier is better than what he's been playing like the last 2 games. We know that this receiving core is incredible. We know they've got the people in place to, go out on the field and put up points. They're just not doing it. And so, and Brian Kelly again at his press conference was saying Joe Sloan was doing what he was asked to be doing. But at a certain point in time, you've got to try to figure something out to, even in games like this where you're just trying to control things, make it look better. And one thing I was thinking about post game, and again, this is something that I haven't really heard anybody talk about, and maybe this is just too crazy of an idea. But, I was thinking back to that '07 game where Matt Flynn's your quarterback, and you've got a good offense with good weapons, Demetrius Byrd, a young Brandon LaFell, Keelan Williams, Jacob Hester, Richard Dixon, like pretty good offense. And you know what they did? They used a 2 quarterback system, which was very popular at that time. Florida had done that, won a national championship, and that became kind of the new trend, was trying to do a 2 quarterback system. Well, LSU that year in 2007 did use a 2 quarterback system. We don't really think about it a whole lot, but Flynn was the primary guy. He was the passer. He had some mobility, like he was a decent runner. But then they also used Ryan Perrilloux, who was this highly coveted backup quarterback, was a huge recruit that they had landed in the Les Miles era, and you know was a guy that, and nowadays he would have transferred out after year 1. But Perrilloux would come in, and people kind of knew what he was in there for. He was in there primarily to run, but Perrilloux had also shown he could throw the ball, and he obviously had a great game against Tennessee that year when Flynn was out. But like they used the 2 quarterback system because they knew Flynn A had hurt his ankle, and he wasn't as mobile with the ankle injury for a couple weeks, but also B, they just knew Perrilloux was a better runner than Flynn overall. He was a faster runner. He could do what he needed to do. And I'm not saying that this is going to save LSU season or anything, but you've got a backup quarterback in Michael Van Buren that can use his legs pretty well. I mean, he showed it at Mississippi State last year. I was actually at the Egg Bowl last year between Mississippi State and Ole Miss. I went with a couple of friends that are Mississippi State fans. We got great seats to the game. I mean, I watched Michael Van Buren put on one heck of a performance against Ole Miss, and he did it in a variety of ways, including the running game as a quarterback. I'm not saying you go full-fledged 2 quarterback system, I guess, but like, why are we not even kind of potentially throwing that around as a possibility? I know Nuss is your starter, but here's the thing: Nuss can still be the starter, can still be your primary guy while you still utilize Van Buren's mobility. And if you're worried about burning Michael Van Buren's eligibility, then you don't want to win football games. You want to try to build for some eventual future. Like we're trying to win football games now. We're trying to win an SEC championship and a national championship this year. And on a year where you finally have the defense to do it, I'm willing to pull whatever I got to out of the hat to get things going. I'm not saying Van Buren becomes your starter, but do not listen and think that. But all I'm saying is you've got a guy who can add that kind of stuff into the offense. Why not try to utilize it at least a little bit? Because Nuss, while he can run a little bit here and there, and he did have a couple runs tonight where he finally did look like he was trying to kind of do the thing we've all been wanting him to do, which is, hey, they're not giving you anything. Just run forward for like 6 yards and fall down. But like Van Buren can be a weapon on the ground. Like try to sprinkle him in and use him. Like I don't know why we've gotten into this mode. And maybe it's just because of how college football is now, but we've gotten to this new era where, hey, we've got one QB and he's the only one we're using, and that's it. And look, obviously, for LSU especially, it's worked out. But you also had 2 Heisman, transcendent type quarterbacks playing the position, and Jaden Daniels and Joe Burrow. That's why you never took them off the field. But like what I'm saying is obviously Nuss is not to that level. Nuss is not a a Joe Burrow and he's not a Jaden Daniels, but he can be a really good quarterback for you. Obviously, he's shown that. All I'm saying is I would like for them to try to think about some other way they can spark up this offense. And I just think maybe going to a two quarterback system, which hasn't been done in my mind in a long time, I think that could be something that could be useful. Now, again, that's just my probably very limited coaching brain here and, running. But I was thinking about that as I went back and I actually rewatched that '07 game before the Florida game on Saturday night. And I was like, that could be something. And so I don't know. We can put a pin in it for right now, but there's just got to be something though that gets this offense going. And even like you look at the end of that game too, on that run that Caden Durham had for 51 yards. I mean, how did they set it up? It was an I formation. It was kind of a weird stack I formation, but you put Jack Pyburn in there. You put Bauer Sharp as your fullback. And what happens? You put a hat on a hat. They absolutely, I mean, bowled over people. Not just Pyburn and Bauer Sharp, by the way, but your offensive linemen powered over people and freed it up for Caden Durham and allowed him to run down the field for 51 yards and got a big gain. Like, that was awesome. And sometimes I think we're too married in college football nowadays to the new concepts, the new things to forget, hey, we don't want to be completely ancient and archaic, aka Les Miles. But man, some of that stuff can still work and can still be successful if you can utilize it in the right ways. And so again, I mean, call me crazy. I'm not saying we go back full Les Miles here, but I think there's some ideas and some things we can take and we can use that to help the offense to improve. Because Brian Kelly in that press conference right after the game was bragging about that run play at the end of the game. And look, you don't take that play out, that play happened. But it's like, okay, yeah, pat yourself on the back for at the end of the game finally drawing up a play that got you a significant run play. But we want to see more of that throughout the entire game, not just with, a minute left in the fourth quarter. It's just a bummer. And there's really just not much else I can really say. I mean, it was just a disappointing night for this offense and for this team. And so that's the thing is like, where do you go from here? That's my biggest concern is because like I said, you've got the defense. I mean, this is a top 10 defense in the country, in my opinion. I mean, and I think there's a lot of people saying that this is one of the best defenses in the country, just from their coverage ability, their, ability to get pressure on the blitzes. You were obviously, you were hurting a little bit without Whit Weeks and eventually West Weeks too, but most of the time you're getting pressure and you're getting home on it. Like, and even in the game when they didn't, they still played well. Like, this is a great defense. And you've got to figure out a way to get an offense going because if you can't, this is going to end up being a really, really long year for you. And honestly, I'm getting a little bit more and more uncomfortable looking ahead on the schedule of can this team really go out there and win 11 games at least? And maybe even 10. Because here's the thing, I had them going 10-2, and after they beat Clemson, which was one of the losses I had predicted for them, I was like, man, what if this is an 11-win team? That'd be awesome. But now I'm worried if they'll even get to the 10 mark that I set. Because there are some teams that have, good enough offenses where I think at some point there will be an offense that can score somewhat on this defense. I do think that. I mean, no defense goes through the whole year being perfect. But, you got to face tough offenses like Lane Kiffin, Taylon Green in Arkansas. While they're not necessarily a great team, Taylon Green can cause some problems. And you shut him down last year, but that doesn't mean, you necessarily shut him down this year too. Like he could just have some wild performance and go off. Who knows? But that's the thing. There's a lot of different variables that can happen from week to week to week. And this offense has got to start showing some signs of life at some point, or you cannot feel comfortable picking LSU to be a playoff contender and a championship contender. You just can't. And I'll say this because, I know I've probably been talking about this for a while now, and, I can go on forever probably about this, but there's one mark before the first bye week that's going to reveal a lot about how the future of this team is going to be. And that's at Ole Miss. Because against Southeast Louisiana, you shouldn't have any problems. You should be able to bowl them over. Now, if you can't do that, start hitting the panic button big time. But Ole Miss's defense is terrible this year. Ole Miss's defense did not look good against Arkansas. Ole Miss has lost a lot of talent defensively, and we'll preview that game as it comes up. But Ole Miss isn't a great team this year, and so, for the most part, you shouldn't struggle offensively against them. But if you struggle against Ole Miss, especially, but even against Southeast Louisiana, start hitting the panic button. But Ole Miss is the benchmark test for me, at least before the bye week. Hey, if we can't go out against Ole Miss and put up yards and put up points, this is going to be a long year because even Kentucky put up some points and moved the ball a little bit against Ole Miss. And Kentucky is terrible offensively. So that's the thing, is this is a team that is definitely in a very, very difficult position right now because the defense can carry you a lot. It really can. I mean, this defense is going to be able to carry you a lot this season. It's got the talent to do that. Offensively, you've got to be able to back them up. At some point, offensively, you have to be able to be a backbone for this defense too. And if you can't support them, eventually you're going to fall short. And so, yeah, Ole Miss is going to be the biggest test, but I don't feel very comfortable right now really throwing them out as a contender for anything big until they can prove to me offensively that they can go out there and do it. Now, of course, again, 2 of your first 3 games have been against really good defenses, despite how Florida has looked overall, despite the fact that Clemson just lost to Georgia Tech and has just had a rough start to the year. Both of those defenses have been really good and have really, really good players on them. So you can at least kind of be okay knowing that you did play really good defenses, but you should not be struggling as much as you have, especially against Louisiana Tech and against Florida. So, yeah. But overall, obviously you're happy about the defense. You're happy with the win. You're happy to get out of here. And the fact that you have Southeast Louisiana where you can kind of hopefully reset and get guys some rest this week, like West Weeks. I don't really want to see West Weeks on the field this week. Just rest him up. But hopefully you get some guys ready for Ole Miss. Rest Trades Green, get him ready for Ole Miss, and then, you start to feel a little bit better about maybe how the rest of the season can go. But all in all, I'll end it by just kind of saying this, you know, this is a team that's got the guys to turn this thing around. It does. They've got the offensive players to turn this thing around. It's just up to the coaching staff now to put it all together and actually go out there and do it. So, but we'll see. We'll see. And there were some bright spots, for the players of the game this week. So for defense, I obviously had to put Deshaun Spears. If you listen to any post-game LSU show that didn't put Deshaun Spears as their player of the game, then that's just a shame because Deshaun Spears getting 2 picks, including a pick 6 that sealed this one for you. He deserves player of the week for this one against Florida. And then offensively, on a bad night, Aaron Anderson is the one guy that I could give this one to because dude is still a playmaker, dude is still a baller, and he shows up even on the worst night. So Aaron Anderson, and then a bonus player of the game for this one, Grant Chadwick. Shout out to the punter because he's awesome. So, good win. Got out of it alive. Move on to the next one. But there was also some big things that happened in week 3 that we got to talk about. All right, so I'll just kind of quickly run back through the 4 games that we previewed for this past weekend. So that was Clemson, Georgia Tech, Georgia, Tennessee, South Florida, Miami, and A&M and Notre Dame. And honestly, man, I went 3-1 this week, which was probably my best week yet. But Georgia Tech Clemson, here's kind of the big thing. I know that was probably one of the biggest games of this past weekend, just in terms of Georgia Tech getting a huge upset at home over Clemson. And obviously, huge shout out to Georgia Tech, man. Love Brent Key. Just love what he's doing there with Georgia Tech. And they're a fun team to watch just because they're gritty, they're old school style. Like, I really do like that Georgia Tech team a lot. And so I'm glad that they got the win. But now a lot of people are really just absolutely coming down on Clemson, and for good reason. Look, Clemson has obviously fallen short of every benchmark that was projected of them for this year as a team that brought back a ton of talent, projected to be a favorite for the national championship, Cade Klubnik a favorite for the Heisman, all these things, right? But now a lot of like LSU fans especially are starting to wonder if that Clemson win should be discredited because of this. And here's what I'll say to that. And obviously this is an LSU show, so we lean more towards the Tigers of LSU, but I'll say this about Clemson. Has the season gotten off to a rough start for them? Absolutely. And are they not as good as we all thought they could be? Absolutely. I think that's true as well. But this game against Georgia Tech, they did have a lot of injuries where they were down a lot of starters, and that can make a big difference. I'm not saying that's the only reason why they lost, but we got to take that into consideration that when you lose talented guys, you're not going to play as well. But also, we got to remember Clemson's defense is full of really talented guys. I mean, Terrell is an extremely talented corner. You've got two guys on the defensive line and Parker and Woods that are really good. Like you've got some great guys on the defense, and they had to make Georgia Tech work a good bit. Like that's still there. And I know a lot of people are saying, well, they gave up, all those points to Georgia Tech. It's 2025 college football. Like there's very little times anymore that you're just going to completely shut somebody down. It's just very rare. And especially against a team like Georgia Tech that has a good offensive scheme from the standpoint of they have an identity that is locked in and gelled in really well. Like they know that they're going out there, they're being tough, they're going to run the ball, they're going to throw the ball when they have to. They're going to try to go out there and run the ball. Like they know what they need to do, and they're going to do it pretty well. But I don't think we should necessarily discredit the Clemson win just because you did go out there week one on the road in a true road game and beat Clemson in their house. Like that should still be a significant win on the year, even if Clemson falls apart. What I kind of associated it with after that happened on Saturday was 2019 Texas. Because remember, when LSU went on the road to play Texas in 2019, that was a game that at the time looked like it was going to be a huge game. They were both in the top 10. True road game for LSU. At that time, Texas wasn't in the SEC yet. They were still in the Big 12. And you went out there and you won that game, and it was tight and it was close. And everybody's like, wow, these are two really good teams and all this. And then Texas absolutely fell apart as the year went along. And LSU, of course, ended up becoming one of the greatest college football teams of all time that year. Like, but that's a game when you look back, you say, man, how did LSU struggle against Texas in week two? Well, Texas was healthy for that game. Texas had not completely fallen apart, at that time. So, like, you still had a pretty good Texas team put together when you went on the road and played them. And again, I'm not saying that, Texas only fell apart because of injuries or anything. They just ended up not being that great. But just as, teams are allowed to improve over the course of a season, teams can also get worse over the course of a season. I mean, just as they lose confidence, just as, things just aren't gelling together the right way, like teams can also go backwards pretty quickly in college football as well. And I think that's what we're seeing with Clemson is yes, are they still have all the talented pieces? For sure. But are maybe they just not the most well put together team right now and playing at the same, level as they should? Yes, I think that's also true. And so, no, don't discredit the Clemson win if you're LSU. That's still a big win for your season. But just, don't view Clemson anymore as the elite team as you did coming into the year. And that's the thing. I don't think Clemson's an elite team in college football this year anymore. They still may squeak out the ACC as the ACC champs or something like that. but it's going to take falling apart from a lot of these other teams in the league. And let's be honest about this too. Georgia Tech is a really good team. I don't know if they're a college football playoff team or even a contender at all for the playoff, but they're a good team and they should definitely be in the top 25 now. And they definitely should be projected as having a really good rest of the season. So, Georgia Tech, great win. That was one of the most hyped, college football games that I have watched in feels like a long time. But I'm super glad we had this game on Saturday because it was just true college football action and I loved it. But now we'll move on to Georgia, Tennessee, where Georgia did take out the big win in overtime in Neyland Stadium. And look, I did pick Georgia to win this one, but this game surprised me for multiple reasons. One, both offenses put up significant points. I was shocked by that because honestly, both defenses looked pretty good. Like just in terms of the talent on the field, they both defenses made some plays at times that you were like, wow, that's really cool. But the fact that they both put up a lot of points is kind of shocking to me. And here's the thing. Going into this one, I said that I really had a lot of doubts about both Tennessee and Georgia. And not that this game really just turned my viewpoints around completely on them, but I do think, I want to kind of see how the rest of the season plays out for them because Georgia, Gunnar Stockton shocked me. Gunnar Stockton really looked a lot better than I thought. And again, I'm not ready to completely say that he is there and he is 100% the next best quarterback for Georgia. But he definitely had a much better game than I anticipated. And he actually threw the ball a lot better than I thought he would too. Now he's still got some stuff to clean up. Like his pocket presence is not great. He often drifts right into heavy, pockets where like, okay, dude, like you're running yourself right into where the traffic is. Like you have all this clean pocket off to your right, you're moving right into where the pressure's coming from. Like get out of there. But he did show he's got some potential. And so I'm not saying he's going to turn things around and be awesome, but he did pretty good. And the same with Joey Aguilar in Tennessee. They started off really hot. I know they cooled off pretty quickly, but Tennessee put up some points and they looked pretty good. And look, they've still got some areas of concern too. I don't think Aguilar for throwing as many deep bombs as he did in this one really has the arm to do that. Like that was kind of my evaluation of it. Like don't get me wrong, he connected on a couple of them, but like there's a lot of air underneath it. They were actually kind of pretty short most of the time. Like his guy had to go up there and make a super contested catch. But they got some playmakers on the outside for Tennessee. And this could be a really interesting team to watch with a pretty good offense. And Aguilar, despite, maybe a couple of shortcomings, has proven that he's a pretty decent little quarterback for Tennessee out there. So, both teams I think will do fine. I'm not going to pick them to like win the SEC or anything, but I think they'll be good. And look, they both have big games, that will be coming up on the schedule soon. Georgia in a couple weeks has got to take on Bama. That will be an interesting test for them. And then of course Tennessee will have to play Bama at some point. So, they're going to have some tougher games down the line too. But the fact that both of them squared up and made this a really exciting game too, where it went into overtime and all that, definitely a much better game than I anticipated it being. But also, I really do think that this proved that maybe I doubted both of them a little bit more than I should. Again, not completely saying they're both just going to go out there and be fantastic the rest of the year, but I think they're definitely going to be better than I thought they were. So great game, though. That was an awesome game, too, especially coming right. We really had an awesome day of college football. And, those two games, Clemson, Georgia Tech, and Georgia, Tennessee, was just incredible. So great slate there. South Florida versus Miami. I did pick Miami to win, but as you remember, I said I don't like that 17.5 point spread. South Florida's just been playing really good ball. And yes, while I thought Miami would be prepared and would beat them because they're not catching them off guard or anything. Whew, Miami really put the beat down on them on Saturday. I ended up just turning that game off, and putting on a different game because, absolutely, they just steamrolled them. So it was definitely a game where I was a little disappointed by how, quickly it was just over with. But Miami is pretty good. I will say this, I don't know if Miami is going to be a team necessarily that will like, make a run for the title. but they could win the ACC and they could make a run, into the playoff and be a solid team. I just don't know if they have that high end ceiling. I don't know how high their ceiling actually is for this season. Just because I think Carson Beck, while he is pretty good, while the offense moved pretty good, there's just always something about him that just makes me go, I just don't know though. And again, this is South Florida, which is a good team, but I don't think that they're like this elite team. So like I need to see them in bigger games because Notre Dame lost. So, you got to think about, was Notre Dame really an elite team or not or whatever? I don't know. But for Miami, obviously you're going to have bigger tests down the line. That's going to solidify more of my view of this team. But Miami is a good team, and the fact that they kind of put the beat down on South Florida kind of shows, okay, they've got some good potential. Again, I just don't know how far that potential runs. But great, win for Miami, obviously. And honestly, it was a fun run, South Florida. It really was. I'm sad that it's kind of over now, but there you go. And then of course the crazy night game that we had, with Texas A&M and Notre Dame. Oh boy, that was just one that I didn't know how that one was going to end up. And look, I'll say this: A&M. I mean, they showed up and they ended up winning this one out. My only loss on the weekend when picking these games. But I'll say this: for Notre Dame, you put up 40 plus points with a freshman quarterback and CJ Carr. That's pretty good. That's a pretty good performance from them. And you had some defensive plays here and there. Again, it's 2025 college football. Offenses are really good this year, as they have been the last couple years. But I will say this about Texas A&M, and there's going to be a lot of A&M people that probably, if they listen, are not going to be happy with me about this. But I know Marcel Reed just went out there and had a great game, won you the game, all those good things. I still don't know if I really trust Marcel Reed. I don't. Like, and I know that's crazy. Again, he went out there and he won the game and he really made some big plays down the stretch, kind of helped capture it. I'm trying to look up the stats right now to see what he ended up with. He ended up with 360 passing yards. But listen, on 17 completions. He was 17 of 37 for 360 yards. Mario Carver had an 86-yard reception at one point. So he was 7 for 207 in a touchdown. KC Concepcion was 4 for 82 with a long of 45. Yes, they put up some numbers. Reed had 37 yards on the ground too, which is pretty nice. But look, Le'Veon Moss is kind of the biggest point of this offense for me. 20 carries, 81 yards, 3 touchdowns. Like Le'Veon Moss is for real. But I don't know about Marcel Reed still. Because here's the thing. Yeah, 360 passing yards and 2 touchdowns and a win is nice. But I don't know, man. It's just, there's something about him that just seems off. Like, and at the end of the day, I know if you win the game, you win the game. But there's just something I don't trust about it. And so if you're an A&M fan, I would be cautious moving out of this game. Because, yes, you beat Notre Dame at Notre Dame, and that's a great win. But at some point, somebody's going to figure out Marcel Reed. At some point, somebody's going to say, hey, he was 17 of 37, and his leading receiver had an 86-yard reception, and his other one had a 45-yard reception at some point. I mean, what if we take away the deep passing? Like, can he really help us? Or can he really hurt us after that? I don't know. Maybe Marcel Reed will always come up with those kind of plays. I don't know, but I just saying there's something about him I don't trust. I just don't think he's a complete quarterback, and I just think at some point he's not going to be able to win you games because of his deficiencies as a quarterback. So you just need to be cautious and cautiously optimistic moving out of this because while it is a great win, what if Notre Dame's not an elite team? They just got beat by Miami and then now by A&M. What if they're not that elite? And what if you just kind of got lucky to pull out a win in South Bend? I don't know. I just know Marcel Reed to me is not the sharpest quarterback that I've watched. And I kind of worry that, a lot of people are going to put a lot of stock in A&M, and it's going to end up burning them in the behind because they're really not that good. But anyways, that'll be it for our recap here. Also, oh well, I guess one more note here. Watch that Arch Manning film too. I'm just telling you, there's something with Arch too I don't trust. I didn't really want to buy all the hype and all that at the beginning of the year, not just because I'm a hater, but just because I'm like, well, let's just let him play first. Even against these smaller schools, he is really struggling right now, and it's not just picks, because you might throw a pick now and again against a team you shouldn't, but it's the type of picks he's throwing where he's just panicking, throwing it across his body, trying to make a play happen. Like, he's really struggling right now, and he is not looking very good. And I know he's still young, he's still developing. I'm not saying I'm completely writing off Arch as a quarterback. He could improve and get much better. He's allowed to do that, but I'm just saying for this year, you know, Arch Manning's performances may hold Texas back from going anywhere significant this season. Once they start playing in these tougher SEC games, I think Arch is going to start to really struggle and start to really, really have some slip ups. So, all that being said, phenomenal week 3 of college football. This was a ton of fun this weekend. I had a great time. Tigers winning, of course, is always the cherry on top of a great weekend of college football. But let me know what you guys think. You can hit us up at Bayou Roar Pod on both Twitter and Instagram. I'd love to interact with you guys, hear about your favorite plays of the weekend, what you think about the LSU offense. Is the 2 quarterback system something we should go for? I don't know. But let me know. Love to hear from y'all. And also, if you make sure to like, share, subscribe wherever you get your podcast from, that would be awesome. If you're on YouTube, if you could subscribe as well, that would be great. We would love to have you join our club each and every single week. But until next time, hey, I hope you guys have an awesome week. We'll be back at the end of the week to talk about the Southeast Louisiana game and kind of just making picks for week 4 because let's be honest, that's not going to be a very exciting game, but we'll be back at the end of the week to talk about that one, preview week 4. And until then, I hope you guys have a great one, and let's go Tigers.